This is a balmy Cleveland day, and I'm sure that others will join us. My name is Roland Englund, and I'm the Dean of the Maxine Goodman Levin College of Urban Affairs. Welcome to Closing the Talent Gap, Aligning Opportunities for a Greater Region. As you know, we are in a new world of work. Economic development is workforce development. It may have been separate in the past, but now it's one and the same. But we have challenges when we think about workforce preparation, post-secondary attainment being number one. But there are other issues, including connecting talent to employers. We're very fortunate this afternoon in that Team NEO released a report recently, again called Closing the Talent Gap, and they're here to discuss it. And I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say, because it's of critical importance to the region's future. So with that, welcome Team NEO, and welcome Jacob Doritsky, who will help us by understanding some of the data.
Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? I am particularly excited to be here at my alma mater talking about talent today. Team NEO, which you'll hear about in a second, is, I'm happy to say, employees of our 27 staff members. 12 are graduates of the Levin College of Urban Affairs, and 9 of those with graduate degrees. So Levin has served as a wonderful pipeline for us over time and really produce people with the skills and talent that we need to help drive the region forward. So Dean Englund, thanks for hosting us, and thanks for the quality of students you put out. I'm going to spend about 10 minutes giving you a brief overview of the work we've been doing for 3 years now, in part funded by Shobha Qatar and the Cleveland Foundation previously, to think about talent in the region, talent in Northeast Ohio, and how talent alignment can help us be competitive as we think of some of the macroeconomic challenges we face in Northeast Ohio in the coming 3, 5, 7, 10 years. So 3 things really quickly. 1, brief overview on Team NEO and the strategies and why talent is so important to us. This report comes out as, a bit of a theoretical document. What it is to us every day is the practical need for talent for the business development pipeline as we're working with companies to help grow the economy. Talent is far and away the number one driver of the decision they're going to make on where to make that investment. 2, briefly, economic demographic overview at the highest level on some of the challenges we see. And then 3, aligning opportunities and how it's driving into these actionable solutions we hope to drive economic growth. But what I'm really excited to get to is our panel. So Team NEO, Regional Economic Development Group, represent 18 counties in Northeast Ohio, trying to grow our economic competitiveness and prosperity for all residents and businesses in the region. We serve as a regional table. There's a state economic development group called Jobs Ohio, and we are the Northeast Ohio partner for Jobs Ohio. Last year, working with partners and companies, we helped create 78 new wins, new investments from companies, 6,400 jobs, $280 million in new payroll, and almost $2.5 billion in new capital investment. Seeing an upward trend over the last 3 years. We're seeing a lot of momentum. Going forward, talent is going to be one of the challenges on how we continue that pace of growth. When you think about the Economic Development Network and who we are, Northeast Ohio is that yellow quadrant in the upper half of the state, cover Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Youngstown. We sell as a region. I'll tell you about that in a second. But we're part of a network. We're that gray slice of the pie there. We serve the region, but we have a host of state, local, economic, workforce, higher education, and community development partners who help us do what we do and help us be successful every day. Ned Hill, who I studied under here and was a graduate assistant of, had a saying, which is, there's no silver bullet in economic development. This demonstrates that to a T. It takes a lot of people in a complex system to help drive the economy forward. When we think about a region, for us, it's selling something that's greater than some of its parts. We have the unique position of being around Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Youngstown, 4 fairly major metros in the country. That collective selling power helps us be more appealing to companies. A very quick example of that, we're working with an IT software company right now. They looked at the Cleveland MSA only. For data people in the room, the Cleveland MSA is 5 counties surrounding Cuyahoga County. When they ranked the potential college output just from those 5 counties, out of the 30 markets they were looking at, we came in 29th. They said, you can't compete for this opportunity. When we went back and pitched them on the 18-county region, 25 colleges and universities, 4 million people, 2 million workers, we went from 29th to 6th, and we're still in contention for that opportunity. So this makes a real difference in the way companies think about things like supply chains, things like talent pipeline, and things like our ability to source talent over time. 5 core strategies that I won't dwell on. Strengthening a network. We can always do better at the way we coordinate our work. Advancing technology adoption around additive manufacturing and the industrial Internet of Things to help inject new technologies into our manufacturing base. Addressing the talent gap, which we're talking about today. Growing a pipeline of competitive sites. Manufacturing is still almost 40% of everything we do in Northeast Ohio's economy. They need places to make investments. And then promoting Team NEO in Northeast Ohio to the rest of the world. When we think about the regional economy, we track ourselves based on 4 key economic measures: total employment, gross product, productivity, and per capita income, in that order, starting from the top left. And unfortunately, it's been a mixed bag in performance relative to the rest of the country over the past few years, and really the past few decades. Had we grown the same as the U.S. over the past 4 years, we'd have a little over 100,000 more jobs than we do today. We haven't recovered the jobs we lost during the Great Recession. Changing gross product would also be $8 to $10 billion higher. We have gotten more productive as an economy, about $3,000 more per worker, and incomes have been a strength of ours as a region. But something we've been doing lately, and something that's important to sort of contextualize the conversation around talent, is sort of taking on preconceived notions of the way we think about Northeast Ohio's economy. And no one that grew up in Greater Cleveland or the Midwest can sort of get away from the fact that we're considered the Rust Belt by a lot of parts of the country. And the Rust Belt is a testament to the fact that since 1990, Northeast Ohio lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. And the way we think about our economy has changed dramatically. And metals and transportation equipment and electronics declined significantly in employment, and those were painful changes. But what that has hidden over time is what was really happening to manufacturing over that same period of time was becoming much more productive. Yes, we lost jobs, but people were making significant investments in the types of products we make. Productivity grew by 92% between 1990 and 2015, projected to grow almost another 75% in the coming decade. We're doing it with less people, but the products we're making are demanded around the globe and still driving our competitiveness from a manufacturing perspective. And that's important as we think about the talent of today and the talent of the future, as we'll hear about, because manufacturing is still a very key component in that. But we've also, and I apologize, this is an eye chart, diversified significantly from an employment perspective. If you look at the third bar up, manufacturing in 1990 in the blue had 450,000 workers. Today it has 265,000. But we have seen gains in many other sectors of the economy, helping us diversify, helping us become more resilient to recessions. But we need to see more of that diversification, and that's where talent becomes a key. But when you look at output, real dollars adjusted for inflation, manufacturing is actually higher than it's ever been, and we're seeing those investments across the board. The challenge from our world is that when we think about those things we invest in, what we call our driver industries, professional services, metals, automotive, chemicals, healthcare, they're big and they're meaningful, and they account for a big portion of our economy, but they're not necessarily adding new jobs. So if you look at the next 5 or so years, projections show anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 net new jobs throughout those sectors of the economy. That's good and that's helpful, but that's not going to drive where we move going forward. So how do we think about those areas in the service economy, in the manufacturing economy of high-tech portions we can make investments in that strategically align around those industries we care about? That's the economy at a very high level. We also have demographic challenges. There's a lot of good demographic things going on in sort of a micro lens. But when we think about the broader demographics of the region, population is declining slightly. Labor force peaked in the early 2000s and has been declining ever since. Labor force participation rates are down slightly in the region. The population trend I talked about over a really long period of time has declined noticeably and continues to show small but marked declines in the economy. And we're also aging a bit more than our peers in the country as a whole. Our demographics skew about 5% older than the rest of the nation. And that's particularly important and critical to manufacturing, where we haven't necessarily been producing a lot of talent for the future. And those people leaving the labor force, we talk about manufacturing declines. If you look at job openings in manufacturing, over the next 5 years, we're projected to have nearly 100,000 production openings in manufacturing alone. So not net new growth, but the significant need for replacement work. Demographics economy at the highest level. Happy to talk in depth about any of that later on during the Q&A. But our solution to that, in part, which began with a report funded by the Cleveland Foundation, was based on a study that the Cleveland Foundation was cared about that came out that said by 2025, 65% of jobs in Ohio are going to require some type of post-secondary credential. That might be a CTE, it might be an associate's, it might be a bachelor's, but the population here needs to become more educated over time. And unfortunately, they looked at that as it stands today. 34% of people have that post-secondary credential. Another 21% started some type of training or program but haven't led to anything. And another 46% have no credential. To be competitive, we need to address this. We had other concerns. To the bottom of this page are the demographic concerns we talked about. Another big concern that we can't stress enough is the equity concern. In 2017, in a historically tight labor market, whites had unemployment rates that averaged 5.4% in the region. African Americans had unemployment rates at 16.5% for Northeast Ohio, so triple that of their white counterparts. And unfortunately, when you look at some of the issues surrounding this, it's things that we can't necessarily take on ourselves, but are part of that bigger system. Transportation issues, wraparound services necessary to give people opportunities to create and go for great jobs. We looked, as a simple comparison, given where we are, at Slavic Village relative to the city of Solon. Found that in the city of Solon, the labor force that doesn't have a high school diploma is about 2%. In Slavic Village, that number is almost a third. The challenge is those people in Slavic Village could potentially be eligible for jobs in the manufacturing base, say in Solon, but that trip, thanks to analysis by our partners at the Fund for Economic Future, could take 90 to 120 minutes each way, 2 different buses, 52 different bus stops. It makes it impractical. So while we're talking about labor as it's sort of this thing we can control, there are a lot of other variables outside of our expertise that need to be addressed to fix this. Another new piece of what we're analyzing is how do we keep more college graduates here? We actually have a pretty strong retention rate. When you look at the bar chart to the right, we keep almost 47% of the students who go to a college or university in Northeast Ohio here 1 year later in a job. And that's great. That translates to 14,600 or so new workers in the labor market every year. The problem is, if you look at Chicago at 48%, that 1% difference in a market so much bigger gives them almost 50,000 new workers a year. How do we keep more of the people that are here while trying to attract new workers back to the labor market over time? So for us, it's the demographic issues, it's thinking about equity more fully, and it's thinking about how we keep those talented individuals who go to school here in the market. Finally, as I get towards the end of my slides, the takeaway from our Aligning Opportunities study, and there are executive summaries on the table over there that you can actually see this on page 7, is that in 3 key areas of the economy, IT, manufacturing, and healthcare, those 3 that are listed there, anywhere you see red here, we're significantly underproducing credentials relative to demand. Just to give you a high-level overview, on the first line, computer and IT workers, there were 12,661 unique job postings in Northeast Ohio last year for IT workers. A year before that, 2,200 credentials across the spectrum had been conferred, a gap of over 10,000 in terms of supply versus demand. If you just look at entry-level demand, those that require 3 years or less, that number is still over 3,000. We have opportunity in the economy. There are opportunities in IT, manufacturing, and healthcare, and that doesn't mean you have to be a welder, you have to be a software developer, you have to be a registered nurse. And that's, I think, part of what we want to talk about today is thinking differently about where demand is in the economy and how we can think about talent alignment that fits people's needs around that. Our report, thankfully, is leading to strategies being developed in the economy. College Now is leveraging this to map individual programs to those at institutions so that people and adults and students thinking about where opportunity lies can get a better understanding of where they can go for those programs. Sector partnerships in Cuyahoga County and Summit County are being developed focusing on those 3 key sectors of the economy. In higher education, University of Akron and others are thinking about curriculum in new and different ways that align with demand. Our role in this is the Talent Development Council, which we're leveraging business and higher education from where we sit, which makes up a lot of our board. Marcia Ballinger, president of LCCC, Bill Blasi, CIO of Eaton, are co-chairing that to say, how do we think about this as a business development issue in developing talent pipelines over time to help make us more competitive? Implications you can read there. We touched on all of them, so I won't dwell on those, but I do think and look forward to the discussion we're going to have today. So with that, I'd like to invite the panelists up, and we will give each of them 60 seconds or so to introduce themselves. get settled. Thank you. So thanks again for coming out. And Dean Englund, if we could start with you, maybe just 60 seconds from each of you on your role on this panel and why talent matters so much to you.
Well, again, good afternoon. My name is Roland Englund, and I'm the dean here. I come at this from a long history of working in the fields of community and economic development and workforce development. I have a history in philanthropy, having worked for 10 years at the Ford Foundation, and I funded a number of workforce development programs to actually close the talent gap. At Rutgers University, I worked with the community to engage and build a talent pipeline that we call in Newark, New Jersey, called the Newark City of Learning Collaborative. It was a post-secondary attainment collaborative, and it's one of the better things that I've done because I think we contributed a great deal of knowledge and experience and know-how on how to build or close the talent pipeline or talent gap.
Thanks, Dean Englund. Autumn?
Good afternoon. My name is Autumn Russell. I am currently the Executive Director of Magnet's Early College, Early Career Program, which is a youth apprenticeship program designed to help grow the manufacturing workforce. My background is not, in fact, manufacturing, however, responsible for mostly developing strategies and initiatives to support workforce development initiatives. And I have about 15 years in education, and as mentioned, at the higher education level, as well as work in the local school districts, K-12, and at the state level with the Ohio Department of Education, all working with workforce development opportunities for youth at the college level as well as K-12.
Thanks, John.
Good afternoon. My name is John Flynn. I'm with MCPC. I am our Director of Talent Acquisition and Talent Solutions. So both workforce development and getting access to technical talent is everything in my world right now for MCPC and for the clients that we serve.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Green, and I have the pleasure of serving as Vice President for Strategic and Institutional Development at Lorain County Community College. I'm pleased to be representing our President, Dr. Marcia Ballinger. I've had the pleasure of being at Lorain for over 23 years now and have been deeply involved in both workforce, economic development, and talent development. And as a community college, really sitting in the middle of the ecosystem, working with business and industry, with higher education partners on the 4-year level, with K-12, as well as with community partners to really bridge this talent gap to help all of our communities thrive. And we know that talent is something that doesn't look at county borders. It doesn't look at political systems. It really is, I think, the greatest asset that our region has, and really want to applaud Team NEO for putting that front and center as something that we can grow as an asset in Northeast Ohio to make Northeast Ohio really attractive as we grow our economy here.
My name is Courtney Diorio. Good afternoon. When you put it to us, what is your passion for workforce and why I'm here? I think it's in part because of my role. I'm Executive Director of RIGHT, which is now an arm of the Greater Cleveland Partnership, or the IT Industry Workforce Alliance in Northeast Ohio. I've been doing that for 10 years in not only the capacity I serve now, but really boots on the ground when it first started and was originally housed with Lorain County Community College. But my initial passion actually goes back to my first job in nonprofit after I graduated from college. I was a job developer for Cleveland Works, and for any of you who may remember that organization, it was a predecessor to Towards Employment in some ways, and I was on the ground talking to folks who had significant barriers, trying to get them in front of employers and employers to see past their barriers to their skills and their knowledge and their experience. And so that carries with me today as I work at a systems level with a variety of partners, sectors that Tracy just mentioned, starting first and foremost as RIGHT is an industry-led endeavor. So I'm delighted to be a part of the conversation.
Good afternoon. I'm Traci Phelps. I'm with the Northeast Regional Sewer District. I'm the Deputy Director of Operations and Maintenance. Have over 35 years experience in engineering and operating water and wastewater plants. My experience includes managing large staffs of 200 plus, designing water plants, wastewater plants, mentoring, guiding people. But as far as what inspires me about this is helping young folks, being in the field, seeing what's out there, that we do need this gap. There's a huge gap that we need to bring folks together, and that's my passion, is to have people aware of what's going on. Thank you.
Great, thank you all so much. So the format that we're going to have for the next hour, hour and a half or so is I have a question specific to each one of the panelists, then we'll open it up for a couple of group questions, and then look to you to fill out the remainder of that time with your questions from the audience. But Dean Englund, starting with you, I referenced at the beginning of this that almost half of Team NEO's employees come from Levin. We still view the benefits of a traditional 4 or even graduate education and what that's done for all of us in our careers, and it's been very meaningful. But we also are looking at the data that tells us that there are 3 areas of the economy, manufacturing, healthcare, and IT, where there's significant demand. And I think one of the challenges we see in our day-to-day business is those tend to be 2 separate conversations. Either you go for your traditional 4-year, you think about those in-demand areas, and I think the line's a little more gray than that. How do you think about students at an institution like Levin and where they have potential to inject themselves and overlap in the rest of the economy where there is demand?
I like to answer that 2 ways. One, I think we need to change the way we do our own teaching here. We have to be much more relevant to the region. And if we're honest with ourselves, we have to look at public safety and nonprofit development. So if we are going to ask others to look at sector-based employment, we have to be much more involved in those sectors. But that's the smallest part of it. We're small potatoes in the bigger question of workforce preparation. I think as a college, we need to be much more involved in convening. We need to be much more relevant in terms of data preparation and showing trends and working with others like Team NEO. So that's something I think we need to take a close look at. But I think the question is for higher education in a broader vein. Higher education needs to rethink its role in workforce preparation. We need to be mindful and intentional about creating pipelines, helping our partners create pipelines. I spoke about a post-secondary attainment network. I call it a post-secondary opportunity network. We need to be very involved in that, and CSU has been involved in that. We have a high school on campus. In fact, I think we have 2 high schools on campus, and that's the type of thing we need to engage with and broaden. We need to start earlier. Higher education needs to be involved in pre-K through when working with partners. We need to work with the primary and secondary schools. We can't just be the isolated city on the hill. We have to be much more of an anchor, play a much more of an anchor role in developing folks earlier.
And I think that's a great point, because one of the criticisms of ourselves even is that, although we have great linkages into higher education and business, oftentimes we're having these conversations at too late of a junction, and when a person is deciding what career path they want to take and how you give them access into what aligns with that. And Courtney, maybe jumping over to you, a segue into that, I had at the very successful cybersecurity event you put on a week and a half ago, a conversation with a student from Baldwin Wallace. And that student from Baldwin Wallace was very interested in criminal justice and wanted to go into criminal justice. And as we were talking through sort of aligning opportunities, I said, well, are you thinking at all about cybersecurity? The answer was, well, not really until today, right? And they were second year, sophomore, but hadn't thought about the alignment of their passion with a technology that could keep them highly employable for decades to come. And I think that's one of the challenges as we think about things like IT in Northeast Ohio. We're not Silicon Valley, we're not Apple, we're not Microsoft, but IT is embedded in everything we do. So as you talk to young people about IT careers and IT opportunity, how do you talk to them about the diverse opportunities that Northeast Ohio offers them as students?
Thank you. Well, that actually is a passion of our chairman, Bill Blousy, who was mentioned, is engaged with Team NEO. And one of the first programs we actually created was the one that Jacob just mentioned, was experienced a couple of weeks ago. It was our 8th annual passport to IT careers. And so the way we talk about IT, first and foremost, I learned early in, I am not a tech person per se, but I am a generalist enough to be dangerous. But we understand that all companies use tech. As you said, it's embedded across all sectors. There are a broad range of roles. Many people think of IT as software development, which couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, there is significant demand, and those skills are very, very useful in an IT career path, but there are a whole range. In fact, the last look at job postings, there were 50-plus job categories, not the specific job categories that you might see in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but the more forward-thinking job families that are coming through these employers, from small companies to tech sector companies to enterprise-wide firms to government to nonprofit. There's tech in everything. And so I do think it's something that can be complicated, and we continue to learn how to talk about it. I would say that we do emphasize that in IT, based on what we know, that while it is not a straight line for most folks in IT, getting some post-secondary credential does provide you with the most choices. So it's certainly something that we advocate in terms of securing credentials or degrees and certificates. So it is something that we've had to learn how to break down. And so we're now at that point where we've begun to understand the need from employers enough to put it into more generalized language for students, but there's still that next horizon. So talking to somebody about, if you like to organize, then you might want to think about being a project manager. You like games, then maybe your path is application development. So I think it's trying to make it as realistic to what resonates with the students, including things we're learning about what drives people to a career in the first place, which is about solving problems or making an impact, and you can do all of those things in IT. So it is a story that we've had to learn how to tell. We actually have created a resource called Explore IT that we're hoping to take digital to make it even more accessible, and we cover the gamut on getting experience now, learning the different skills that you need, not just the technical. But it is definitely a varied path that could serve a lot of folks who have an interest across an array of industry sectors.
And I think a data point that is a testament to that is we pulled the top IT-related job postings for that cybersecurity event, and we had an opportunity to talk to a lot of people in career exploration, and 9 of the top 10 leading employers looking for IT and cybersecurity-related workers did not fall directly into software companies. So they're banks and professional service firms and insurance companies. But it speaks to the depth and of the need for IT talent in this region. Sort of shifting gears a little bit to a point I made late in my aligning opportunities discussion, I think equity is increasingly a critical component to how we think about growth, right? We can't have African American unemployment rates at 3 times those of whites. We can't have an economy that is shrinking in many ways, population and labor force, and not bring the people that are here into it in a more structured and more meaningful way. And there are companies on the leading edge of thinking about that. And one of those companies, John, is MCPC. And we have the benefit and pleasure of having Andy Jones, your CEO, serve on our board. And one of the stories that has stuck with me over the past year or so was when Andy told us about, you can talk about equity, but if you want to live equity, it's a very different thing. In the investments that MCPC has made over time, going from Strongsville to the old Plain Dealer building on Superior, going from there to Midtown, and now into Old Brooklyn, and thinking that location matters, and location matters in terms of recruiting a diverse workforce and the types of employees that you can recruit, and thinking about issues like equity. So maybe speak to why that was important to MCPC and how that has lended itself to greater results from an equity lens for your company.
Right. Well, I think it started for MCPC with the thought that we want to make an impact on our city. Our founder and our chairman decided that if he was to make an impact on the city, we couldn't do that from the suburbs. And the suburbs, while somewhat diverse, wasn't going to give us access to the workforce we wanted. You heard it mentioned earlier, it's access and the ability, transportation being one of those factors to getting access to that diverse workforce. Sometimes you've got to make it available to you. You've got to bring them to you. So the decision was made to move downtown and seek to impact our city in that way. The benefit to that was now we had access to a workforce that was close to busing, close to the bus lines, right? Our first move to 1801 Superior, the former Cleveland Plain Dealer building, we saw an uptick in our ability to hire a diverse workforce and get access to just plain and simple more tech talent, whether that was close to Cleveland State, Case Western Reserve, or other folks in the city that were job changers that were looking to make a new career out of IT. Our second move now to Midtown, where we are today, in some new facilities there, but sits still right on Euclid Avenue, taking advantage of the investment that both the city and the region made in what's happened with Euclid Avenue, and that really coming to life for Midtown, and a lot of that is connecting to jobs. So those jobs exist today, and the diversity of our hires has gone up because of it, and giving access to that. Our newest facility in Old Brooklyn is continuing to do the same thing as we gain access to jobs, and we partner with the Cleveland Metropolitan School District to provide entry-level jobs to high school graduates that are interested in careers in technology, and there they can start in that facility there in Old Brooklyn. And our thought there once again was, how can we impact the city? Once again, how can location and business facilities impact the neighborhood and potentially serve as a shot in the arm?
Very cool. Switching gears a little bit, Tracy Green, we work closely with you on a lot of different things and have for a long time. And while I appreciate the kind remarks about all we're doing to think about talent alignment today, anyone who has spent time with your president, Lorraine County Community College, Dr. Ballinger, for more than maybe 20 minutes, has probably heard her use the stat that 85% of the jobs that are going to exist in 2030 don't exist today. And that while it's critical we think about alignment for the workforce of today, it may be even more critical that we think about alignment of skills and opportunities for where the workforce is going. Right. And LCCC has, quite frankly, been a leader in that field in many different ways. How are you as an institution thinking about balancing those two and thinking about preparing students for the workforce of the future?
Certainly. So I want to comment on what Dr. Englund said earlier. We have to redesign and reinvent ourselves as higher education and workforce and talent providers in order to deliver what our economy and what our community needs. So much of that starts with, it's not preparing for one career or a job. That can be the starting post for that to help meet the right now, but so much of the responsibility really falls on us to really think about what does that longer term future look like. We have to reinvent what does the learning and education outcomes look like, from helping people learn to adapt in a constantly changing environment when your job may be at high risk of automation, when automation is going to happen more and more rapidly, when jobs are going to churn because technology is going to get embraced, it's going to be developed, and that is going to happen. That's what we want to happen. That's part of the entrepreneurial, innovative spirit that we want to embrace, and those are where the opportunities are at. So to constantly be living in this accelerated pace of change and in an environment where the lifespan of what you learn when you're in the classroom is shrinking exponentially, we as educators really have to take that at heart. So as we think about the general education outcomes, part of that has to be living within a world that is constantly changing. Being able to adapt to new environments and new careers along the way, and being able to find the opportunities for whether that's a new technology or new entrepreneurial endeavor to create that new next big thing that happens. And so when I see the risk of automation, I think that's one of the pieces in the Aligning Opportunities report we really need to watch. And I think that's a big signal for our environment, because as we think about the equity conversation, this is also where we're at risk as a community. And we do a lot in as a communities college, we are an open access institution. So anyone who shows up at our door, we need to be student ready. They don't need to be college ready. We need to meet them wherever they're at, whatever barrier they have, and we need to get them to that finish line. We need to help them overcome that. And so much so is when you think about this risk of automation, individuals that are in the lower wage skilled jobs that need to help fill these talent gaps, the equity agenda really means reaching really deep into some of our most impoverished communities. We have 2 cities in Lorain County, Lorain and Elyria, that are about at 25, 26% poverty rates. But when you peel back that data and you look at the single female heads of households, if you really want to make a game changer in a community, you get to those single female heads of households where over about 55% of those that are living in poverty are headed by single moms who have children under the age of 18. That's where we have to get to. That's where we have to get from that building block of just being able to get to that credential that can get to that first opportunity as at MCPC, and then level up and keep that relevancy. But I think a lot of it has to come back to us, and we have to reinvent what has been historically our way of doing things, and that's not going to be good enough for what this type of economy is going to mandate from workforce and talent providers.
Yeah, things are changing, I think, more quickly than many of us even realize. And you can view automation as a threat, and in some ways it is. But if you view the upskilling, it's a huge opportunity to keep yourself relevant in the economy. Traci Phelps, speaking from an employer's perspective, we were chatting before this, and you shared with me that you had a couple of positions that went unfilled for years, 3 years, I think you said. And as we talk to companies all the time who are thinking about creative solutions to try to fill that pipeline, one of the ways they're thinking about it is through internships. I know the Sewer District is a big user of interns historically. How are interns helping you fill some of that gap? And if they aren't, what are other ways for that job that went unfilled for 3 years that you as an employer are thinking about creatively finding ways to source talent?
Okay. Well, interns for us, that's a big pipeline. Every year, we hire anywhere between 30 to 40 interns. But what's critical about it, we just don't hire anyone. We're very particular. We only hire interns for specific projects. And during the interview process, we think of interns as a person we're going to keep full-time, not on a part-time basis, but permanent time. So we look at their qualifications, also will they fit into the organization. And one main thing that we do not have them do routine work. We make sure the projects are meaningful. And we expose them to different types of projects. We even expose them to different managers. And what I always do, I have them participate in higher level meetings so they can see how we interact, see how we make decisions. Also, what we do, we bring them on board and we actually have them work with other interns. We have them work in teams so they could learn from each other. And as far as a pathway to our jobs, what we do, we make sure that we give them specific works and assignment so they could put on their resumes. So even if they don't stay with us, they have meaningful work that they can actually put on their resumes to make sure it's successful for them. That's one thing that we do. And also, what we want to do is we have an organization of 800 people, and every year we hire about 100 people externally and 40 interns. So what we try to do is professional. We always make sure they network. With the 800 people, half of them have degrees, so we have events where they network with other professionals so they can get an idea, learn what's going on. We got to get them excited. Like I said before, they get bored quickly, so you got to keep them excited. So, and like he mentioned, we had a position which is automation. Mm-hmm. We had 3 automation positions that we could not fill for 3 years. So we had to hire a private consultant to come in. Then I asked the manager, well, why, what happened? Because colleges now, the private industry, we're going from analog to digital. They haven't really switched over to digital, and that's our main gap. So what we're doing now, we actually have our own apprenticeship program with the district. It's a certified apprenticeship through the state of Ohio. We have 20 people in the program. So what we're doing, we are taking our custodians, our maintenance workers, and they're coming into these positions, and we're training them for 2 or 3 years into full-fledged ITs, electricians, machinists, and we're partnering with Traci to do that. So what we need right now is more colleges to partner with to get more of that pipeline.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into the question for Autumn. And Autumn, we see increasingly that apprenticeship-esque model emerging, not just in manufacturing, but through IBM and Partners in IT, through the sewer district. And Magnet, in many ways, has been at the forefront of that in Northeast Ohio and making investments in that. And we know our European counterparts have done that for decades with great success. But as you think about the early college, early career programs at Magnet, maybe explain a bit to this group who might not be familiar what exactly that is and why you think apprenticeships and that earn and learn model can be so effective for preparing people for the workforce.
Absolutely. And so for those that may not know, Magnet's a manufacturing advocacy and growth network. And for the past 30 years, we have helped manufacturers grow in Northeast Ohio, serving 18 counties in the region. And so the Early College, Early Career program was designed for manufacturers to help grow the manufacturing workforce and help these manufacturers build their own talent pipeline. It's essentially the best parts of the German-style apprenticeship, and we just adopted it into the U.S. education system. And so what makes our youth apprenticeship program so unique, there's 3 major components to our program. The first is the paid internship or the work-based learning experience, where we are placing high school students, specifically 11th and 12th graders, in paid internships around the region. They are getting the real hands-on experience and training at these manufacturers in the plants. Part-time, 8 to 12 hours a week during the school year, but then they have the opportunity full-time employment between the 11th and the 12th grade year in that summertime. So they're full-time, 40 hours a week in the summer. Coupled with that, we've also offered education and training. And so we have great partners with Traci and LCCC, where our students are taking real college courses, earning real college credit that maps to a degree in manufacturing and technology. Out of those courses, they also will earn an industry recognized credential. So these students essentially will graduate high school with 2 years work experience, an industry recognized credential, and up to 15 credit hours towards a degree. What also makes our program unique is that we take a holistic approach to developing the students. Not only do we offer the paid internships and the education and training, we also offer support services. So we have mentors on our team that are full-time and that are responsible for, 1, developing relationships with these students. Again, we're talking about 16 and 17-year-olds who go from little to no responsibility to now having to juggle the high school work, the college coursework, actual work, and still have time to kind of text their friends, which takes up most of the time. And so we have mentors that help sort of translate kind of the language and kind of get them acclimated into this new world. They also are responsible for identifying any barriers that could hinder their success through the program and linking them to necessary resources. We also offer transportation. We provide transportation to each component of our program, whether it's to the high school, to the community college, or any other, the work site. We provide transportation, which of course is one of the biggest barriers in workforce today. And so currently we are in our 3rd year of implementation. So we launched in 2017, fall, with our very first cohort. To date, we have 71 students in our program. We are across 3 counties, Lake, Cuyahoga, and Lorain counties. We have to date partnered with 11 manufacturers, 10 high schools, and we are super excited to continue this work and to start scaling. Another component of our program that we offer is soft skills training. So many different terms. Soft skills training. And that is, on a weekly basis, we have a community-based organization come out and talk to our students about workforce development. They talk about critical thinking skills. They talk about managing conflict in the workplace and really getting the students acclimated. And that came from our employers themselves, who are at the table helping us continue to develop this model. The employers say, hey, we can handle the technical training, but we need students to understand they have to show up, they have to perform, Safety is priority, so we have to make sure that students are disciplined enough in this type of environment. And so we really take a holistic approach to developing our students in our program. We graduated our first class this past May, which we're super excited about, and we had about 44% of those students go straight into manufacturing careers, which we're really happy about. And of course, we use that real data to kind of drive decision making and continuously improve the model as it relates to strategically recruiting our students. We found that, you know, a lot of students elected in the first year because they just wanted to get out of school early. This is an opportunity, sort of like a field trip. It's a summer job. And so we've really done a much better job of explaining not only the benefits of the program, but the commitments. We want to make sure that we are presenting the right student, the right intern to the companies prior to them investing. We really want to make sure that we are filling a need with the manufacturers in an effort to help them grow. And then we want to continue to develop these seamless pathways for students into these rewarding careers.
That's exciting, and as I mentioned, you know, in some of the work we're doing through the Talent Development Council and others, you see big global companies like IBM in fields like IT and software starting to take an apprenticeship approach to how they're developing talent, and maybe shifting more toward an employer perspective. And I'll open this up to the group now, but I think you each have perspectives on it. You know, I've had 3 interesting conversations in call it the last 6 months, 2 with IT employers. And 1 with the manufacturer. And the IT employers have said 2 different things to me. One said, we got rid of our Bachelor's Plus requirement. We want people that have the technical skills we need, we'll plug them in and we'll find ways to develop them in their careers over time. And the other one said, no, anything we hire in IT still needs a 4-year computer software degree because we view that as a proxy for soft skills, which you just talked about. They made it through 4 years of college. They're probably fairly educated and they can think well on their feet, et cetera, et cetera. And you see the tension between those. The second component of that is a manufacturer we talked with who said, I need to hire 3 welders. I don't want to train those folks. I need to bring them in, plug them in, and let them go to work in week 1 and not have to worry about them. What do I need to pay them? And part of what my team does is provide data to companies on the types of issues that companies face, run wages and things like that. And we got back to that company and said that'll probably be $22 to $24 an hour for a welder of that skill level. And the company came back to us and said, there's no way we're paying anyone that much money. So they don't want to train, and they don't want to pay, and shocker, they're having trouble sourcing talent. So a bigger issue is you sort of think about the tension between where higher education and soft skills and those technical skills end and where employers need to sort of pick up that slack to help you in the work you do. How do you think about that role and what each person bears responsibility for in that process of cultivating talent in the right way over time? Yeah, sure, Tracy.
Yeah, well, I think the employer needs to take more responsibility. I mean, they need to be more accountable. I know you said he doesn't want to pay that rate, but that's the going rate. And employers, what they need to do is to have some type of in-house training program if they don't want to pay the folks to come in. And they also need to cross-train their employees. They may have employees that's already there that may want to move up. You know, send them to a technical school, bring someone in part-time to train them, because that's what we have done, because we were under the same situation. So what do? I mean, we do pay good wages, but we take our own folks and we send them to Traci and we train them, and also we have in-house people train them.
It is a conundrum for companies, I think, when resources are limited and they don't have the people to shepherd someone, to train them. There are some real challenges there. But I think that educational partnerships and experiential training, whether it's an internship or a project, it's a two-way street. And I think that nexus between the employer who wants that try and buy kind of candidate, who may not think in terms of this is actually a learning experience that I'm supposed to create for this intern, that I think that's really the critical juncture where educators that are going deep into experiential learning know how to talk to companies and say, this is not just, we're not handing off a finished product. You need to be a part of this person's developmental process. And there are I don't want to say that those that are doing it are enlightened and those that are not are not. I think that some have real challenges and some are able to invest. One thing, Jacob, you and I and others have talked about is there's a lot of conversation in the region about we need to import talent here, we need to attract people here, and when you really look at the costs of exporting people here versus retaining people, that investment in training could pay huge dividends in terms of retention. And I think upskilling and cross-training really ought to be investments that we figure out how to support. And so, there are resources now at the county, Skill Up, or at the state, Tech Cred, to help companies upskill their people so that they can actually create some agility within their workforce to even think about bringing on an intern, let alone, starting an internship. Because it's extraordinary that you have 40. There are some smaller companies that would love to have an intern, but don't even know where to start. So it is kind of a balancing act.
But one thing that could be done, which I highly suggest, is that companies hire someone to do a business case evaluation. Then they could see the numbers, because right now they're just thinking right now I have to pay $25 an hour, but they're looking 4 to 5 years down the line.
I heard a great idea. A colleague Angela at GCP at an internship roundtable, one of the companies were using their interns to do exactly what you just said.
Business case evaluation?
A business case evaluation about interns. So they were proving to their managers the value they were bringing to the company. And it's sustained and that program's growing. I don't remember the company, but it's a great idea.
Yeah, because every intern that, like I said, we hire, everything's done with a business case. We look at the dollars. Yeah. We're going to bring this person in to work on this project. Is it worth it or not? So.
Other thoughts on that dual responsibility?
Well, I think the responsibilities, it's absolutely dual. I think the employers, though, it's incumbent upon the employers to understand your needs, understand where in your organization what fits. So here's what I mean by that. In our organization, we're going to hire at all different levels. We'll do a lot of entry-level hiring, and I cannot wait for a traditional four-year college to produce enough, oftentimes in the economy, what we need from an IT perspective, right? So we'll hire right out of high school in some of the high school STEM programs that are involved in producing some of these kids that have entry-level certificate programs, or we'll hire those that are changing jobs. Maybe they've utilized the Google IT certificate, for instance, and we'll hire some of those folks into our entry level, and then from there, we're going to teach them. They're going to be on the job training. We're going to add to that training. We're going to grow their careers, and some I might keep a year or two, and then I know that they're going to go out their career. I can't keep all of them, but they're going to go out and they're going to get another job, the next level here in Cleveland, in this market. For the most part, they're looking for opportunity, and then my hope is I keep the best that I can, and I'm going to continue to grow those careers. But we're going to continue to impact the community. We're going to continue to do that entry-level hiring. And I'll figure out, I've got to know where I'm going to work with my four-year institutions, my two-year institutions, and where I'm going to work with CMSD and other high school programs and other ways that I can get enough volume of the talent. When you look at those numbers, right? The numbers that we talked about, there's such a huge gap in the IT marketplace. So I've got to cast a wide net to get enough volume.
Thanks so much. From a higher education perspective, we have to do more to really coach our students about what is the long-term potential in making that career change or partnering with a company and setting a career trajectory to look at what's a realistic wage now. But as you upskill and you gain more certifications, as you get this experience, your line of earning potential is going to far outpace what you might be working if you stay in that retail management, if you stay in this. And the risk of automation is certainly less. So it's helping to educate, I think, on both sides and set those realistic expectations that this is a dating situation, and along the way, at some point you might get married. That's part of this, is really trying to set that there's potential here, but also set some realistic expectations. It doesn't come on day one just because you get a degree in hand. There's also a lot of experience that needs to be earned along the way.
And I'm a big fan of P13 programs, like the one in Slavic Village, where In high school, kids get the opportunity to work with an employer, and in that experience, they can also get credit towards an AA. So you get the knowledge of how to work in an industry, but then you also get the benefit of a credential. So I think that's a good way to get folks acclimated to the world of work. Along the way, they get experience and also a credential.
And I would just echo everyone on the panel, but adding, of course, from my lens, considering high school students. But it's just a joy to be in a place of the intermediary where I'm able to have conversations with the high schools, with the employers, with the higher education partners. But it's much more valuable to have one room with all of these entities in that room driving the decisions. And I would say my suggestion would be, and we're moving towards that with sector partnership and things like that, but just to continue that conversation with everyone at the table.
Great. So one more from me, then we'll pause for questions from the audience. But one area we hear a lot about, and admittedly through my own organization's lens, we're not intimately familiar with, is the policy area and the policy implications for how you think about Board of Regents, Ohio Department of Education, the restrictions and the ability to be flexible, and how you can source talent, how you can think about talent. And we hear about the time it takes to establish new programs, the time it takes to keep up with the market when skills in fields like IT are increasing. If you could think about what state policy could do more to be supportive of you, whether it's higher education, workforce, or a business, what recommendations would you give our state policymakers to make your life a little easier?
Well, in IT and computer science, and it has more to do with ODE, K-12 than higher ed per se. I would defer to my colleagues on the panel on that, but we've after some rigorous discussion as a follow-on to a group of us that had already been working together and then expanded through Blockland last year, kind of came to 4 critical policy planks that we're really exploring, some of which is already getting traction based on the good work of organizations like Cleveland State and CS for All, and CS for CLE, I should say. But establishing standards in computer science K-12 is critical, and that is starting to happen. Both in terms of graduation requirements as well as teacher certification. We think more scaffolding around digital literacy from K to 12 is critical. So we're talking about equity or even just in general, we need to ensure that there is universal access to technology and devices and basic capabilities in order for somebody to even have the foundation of learning about IT as a potential career path. And then the last 2 are really kind of connected, which is reimagine teacher professional development for those that are actually working in the profession, as well as teacher preparation. So we haven't even delved into that through Wright other than to really start to understand what these policy priorities ought to be. But it's definitely a big part of the process in terms of making a systematic shift towards expanding that pipeline at the earliest stages.
Jacob, I'm a newcomer to the region, so I can say this, and I hope you don't stone me. I think we need more of a discussion around what policies are effective and necessary. We have a lot of programs, and they're great programs. I mean, this panel just illustrates that. But I don't think we have a real good dialogue around what is it that the field of workforce preparation needs? What should the state do? What should local governments do? So I would ask for that first as a precursor to what should we ask from state government.
I think when we think about the needs as an employer, when we need people need access to jobs, people want jobs, people need access to skills, and then we have higher education and education in general, and then we have the state. And what that means to me as an employer is it doesn't really meet our world today. Our world today is we're living in a world of Amazon, right? We expect an experience. I want to plug in a need. I want to get a result. I want to get it quick. That doesn't happen at the state level and in education. It's painfully slow to change curriculum, to add new curriculum and certifications. So if I were to comment to the state, remove the barriers, remove the red tape that is dividing people and access to skills and employers access to those skilled people. There is a want and a need, and the gap that exists in between sometimes is clouded by red tape and in just the time that it takes for higher education to get something approved, to get it through. We need to look at ways where we can begin to remove barriers there that get more people skilled and get them in the workforce where they can impact themselves, their lives, and yes, they'll impact us as a business.
So I would echo exactly what was said, except you didn't say that. That was going to be mine.
Sorry.
But that gives me my second one, because I was tossing around which one I was going to lead with. But based on the demographics, based on what we see from the aligning opportunities, we know we have to have more people participating in this economy. And part of that can be we can bring more and attract more talent to this area. But part of which is we have people who are at risk of falling even further behind in participating in our economy. And there are some policies that just work against the way in which the people can get caught up. And part of that is just our programs around social welfare. One of it, for instance, is whether it's our SNAP program or our TANF program. We're really excited about one potential breakthrough to at least pilot something called the Community College Acceleration Program, and it's very, very small. There's only about 5 community colleges piloting this in Ohio. But within SNAP and within TANF is that to maintain eligibility, you have to be working with a certain number of hours. So if you're a family of X size, you have to work X number of hours per week, or if you're single, you have to work X hours a week. Well, if you're already within, if you don't have the skills and abilities to transition to a job that has a higher wage, you're already stuck in lower wage jobs. So part of this new Community College Acceleration Program is called a SNAP ENT, so that instead, in lieu of the work side, you can come into an education and training program that can have a work-based learning, can have an earn and learn model to it, so that there's more of a solution based towards the end. It has to be connected to an in-demand job, but instead of just taking the same status quo and creating the same insanity over and over, we're giving a way out for a family to get more connected to the jobs that are going to pay a living wage for that family and break that cycle of poverty. So that, to me, is if we're going to ask for more people to participate in this economy, we have to break some of the policies that are preventing them from getting there.
It's a great point, and I recall a conversation I had about 6 months ago with someone I didn't know existed, which was a student loan attorney. And this goes beyond state policy into federal policy in many ways. And I was talking to this woman about what she does, and she was talking about how we look at that some college piece of the equation, right? You have those with credentials, you have those with no credentials, you have those who started and life got in the way for whatever reason, and they had to leave. And she was saying she represents individuals who have gone to college, had to leave, defaulted on their loans, now want to go back, but because they defaulted on their loans, can't get their transcripts transferred to another institution, and it's created a vicious cycle where they can't enter back into the labor market to accumulate those skills they need over time. So multi-pronged, but good answers. I have some others, but let me pause there because I do know we all really want to hear from you. So what questions does the audience have for our speakers?
Hi, Matt Ellerbrock, Cleveland State. For Mr. Phelps, you talked about the need to pay your employees, and kind of related to Jacob and how he had that manufacturer who wasn't willing to pay the market rate at $22, and you said we know that that's important. What would you say to that manufacturer if they were here today? Like, why is it important to pay that market rate? What would your response be? Thank you.
Well, I would tell me, if you want quality work, you're going to pay for it. And he may think it's cheap, but he needs to look at the surrounding rate, exactly what folks are paying. I mean, to open his or her eyes. But definitely, if I was to sit down and have that conversation, I would, like I said earlier, do a business case. Look how it could make you money. I mean, how can you really save from it?
And it's something we see time and time again. I mean, I use those examples, but you know, that you can look at sort of the growth in manufacturing wages over the last decade, and there's been very little real growth in some of the wages in the sectors of the economy where jobs are most in demand. So there is absolutely an employer responsibility to that. What other questions from the audience?
Hi, I'm Mary Kelly, and I work at Ohio Means Jobs, Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, just down the street. And one of our strategies this year is we really would like to do a better job of reaching disconnected youth. Those are the youth that aren't coming in our doors, certainly, and they're dropping out of school or not being able to acquire the skills. So they are the people who are in danger of falling farther behind. And I'd just like to get some perspectives from your organizations on how are you thinking about reaching the disengaged youth or people who've dropped out of the labor force participation rate. And I just, would like to get your perspectives on that, since it's something that we have been finding challenging, and we're trying to do a better job of doing that. Thanks.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Can you define youth in the terms that you're, okay, thank you.
I guess I can answer that in this way. So what we've done, we partnered with CMSD. CMSD has a program called School of One. And it's a very unique program to grasp kids at the edge, those that are in serious risk of dropping out of school. What we've done is we've utilized one of our facilities. You may have heard of the Foundry. It's Cleveland's Rowing and Sailing Center down in the Flats, and it is a charitable contribution by our founder to the city. But part of that facility is used as a classroom on a day-to-day basis with this School of One. And this is a select group of students that go to school at the Foundry. Their teacher is there, their classroom is there, and they're exposed to the teamwork that rowing and sailing engender. But then they have specific instruction that's dedicated to them, and it's dedicated to them to complete their high school degree or to get to that GED, right, that gets them employment. Part of that barrier is employment in itself. So the other half of their school day, so they'll go to the school at the Foundry the half day, they participate in some of the team-oriented activities at the Foundry, and the other half of the day, we drive them over to our facility in Old Brooklyn where they go to work for us. So they're able to earn. So you can earn and you can learn, and then hopefully we'll hire them full-time and we'll continue to grow their careers. That program was successful with boys. We've now started a program for girls, and they swap in the half day. So the girls in the morning are working at our facility in Old Brooklyn, and then they go to school in the afternoon. This is a program that is directly dedicated to those kids that are at the edge, those kids that are at risk of walking away from high school and finding meaningful opportunity, right, in our economy. So.
Yes, and we have used the Urban League. Just recently, I gave a presentation to the Urban League. They came down and visited one of our presentations. Because the Urban League program, they teach them soft skills. And this young man, I remember him, and make a long story short, we end up hiring him as an intern because of what we got through the Urban League. So that's our pathway.
I guess in our program, we try to take a more proactive approach. Although I mentioned the internships start at the 11th and 12th grade year, we actually go in and talk to 9th graders about manufacturing in general. So we do a lot of awareness activities. We sometimes bring some of our engineers and conduct some demonstrations for students to see. We talk about, the different manufacturing careers. We also invite parents, and if you recruit students, you have to recruit parents. And try to debunk the perception of manufacturing and show, bring them on the plant tour so they can actually see the new technologies that is in manufacturing. So we try to win them over and expose them early on prior to the 11th grade year. Absolutely. Exactly.
But was your question about out-of-school youth or?
18.
Well, it's a difficult group to work with, as we all know. But across the country, what you see happening is that community-based organizations are being used to try and, with relevance to those kids, like a youth build, to bring them back in. And in terms of policy, what some states have done is to link the Department of Education at and the money follows the kid, so that if you bring a kid back into the system, the Department of Education will pay what they would pay the school to bring that kid back in. So that's a way of trying to get the incentives in place to work with these young people. But it's a very difficult population to work with.
I saw another question right there, and then over there.
Hi, my name is Brian Davis. I'm the Associate Dean of Engineering here at Cleveland State University. So I don't have any questions, I just have concerns, and if any of you want to address any of these concerns, feel free to do so. But one concern, and this follows on from the earlier comments about the fact that higher education needs to change. So my concern is that we're dealing with something that's like molasses. So as an example, at many universities in Ohio, if you want to get a degree in computer science, you also have to take an undergrad course in chemistry. So, including CSU. So I am one of those people who thinks that's ridiculous. Most computer science people will never ever use chemistry ever again in their life. On a related note, and I know this may be controversial, but I grew up in a country that was not the United States, and I chose engineering because where I went, I had to do no gen ed. So I never did Western civilization or humanities or anything like that. The only thing I did from day one in engineering was engineering. And it included manufacturing, computer science, mechanical engineering, all of those things. And so I know in this country, everybody says, well, we need a rounded education. And I can buy that, but there's a compromise. I think training people more for manufacturing and IT and less on Shakespearean plays may be something we should think about. And then my last concern is that before I came to Cleveland State this year, I spent 9 years at the University of Akron. And they had Battelle did a study to look at what the economic drivers were in the Akron area, and they came up with a report as well. And it seems to me that there's a disconnect between Akron and Cleveland. And I'm saying this because when I was at the University of Akron, even though I still lived in Cleveland at the time, but I would go to Europe every year with the mayor's office to attract companies to Akron. And we attracted something like 50 companies from Europe and Israel and all over the place. And it just seems that Akron was trying to do this, and Cleveland might be at the same time trying to do something different. But if we really want to focus on manufacturing and IT, we have tremendous strengths here in Northeast Ohio in polymers and alloys and metals. I mean, the American Society of Materials is based here in Chardon. I think we need to do a better job in kind of getting to your title here, aligning opportunities for a greater region. That I think we need to connect with a bigger area around Cleveland than we do at the moment. So I know this is kind of rambling. I'm going from chemistry for computer science students to, but it's just that I think we can all work together to raise the sea level here.
Well, if the panel doesn't mind, I'll take a shot for the latter portion of that, which is a part of Talent Development Council efforts that are so critical to us are that very challenge you just pointed out. We were talking to a company in Akron, a big company, and we were talking about where they source their talent from. They said, well, number one is University of Akron. It's where we get all our talent from. Okay, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. Where's number two? It was Virginia Tech. Where's number three? It was Boston College. And although they had good linkages into one institution because of proximity, really based on more than anything else, they weren't thinking about the ecosystem and how the ecosystem collectively of higher education throughout Northeast Ohio, Cleveland, Canton, they could leverage to ultimately fill some of those talent gaps. So part of our push to companies, but also to the talent ecosystem, is how do we present ourselves as a more unified front for developing that talent that company needs, so it's not so ad hoc. and people see it more as a system that can actually develop their needs, isn't duplicating things, but is producing the talent they need over time. So I see that piece of it as critical to our role and responsibility in the region. Defer to the panel for the first two pieces of that.
So on your first point, in terms of the alignment of the curriculum to exactly what industry needs, that's at the heart of what we try to do. Particularly, we just launched our applied bachelor's degree within microelectronic manufacturing, and so much of what we could, because we also have the external pressures of keeping the credit hours under a certain number because of performance-based funding and other things, but the ability to contextualize as much of the learning as possible. I mean, part of which is the mandates on higher education, whether they're coming from the state, the federal level, or our own accreditation processes within the Higher Learning Commission to keep some of those standards. But that's where we could really use industry to help push some of those accreditation standards to allow some of that more flexibility in some of the learning outcomes and the assessment of the learning outcomes. It's been since about 2010, 2011 that the state of Ohio moved from an access enrollment-oriented funding system for state share of instruction and moved us completely in about 1 year, maybe 2 years, to 100% performance-based funding, which is completely now on the number of graduates. We're headed toward a track that is going to be based on our graduates performing to the level that is increasing in wages and earnings and employers. These are fundamental shifts in the way that our business model as higher education is going to operate. So the other parts of our system need to be able to be flexible enough to allow us to do what we need to do to hit those performance metrics as well. So that's where we could use the industry partners to help push some of those other standards.
I hear in part of your question the divide between a technical education and a liberal arts education. And I'd be curious to hear from my colleagues on the panel, do we really need to have it that stark? We need a general conversation in society about young people and how we frame their future. You look at parents in most inner city communities, they want their kids to go to college, but that may not be the right thing for them. But how do you convince a striving mother or dad that they should think differently about higher education? But your question, I think, is an important question. I don't think there's an answer, but I also am wary of making it very stark. You weren't doing that, but it is out there. I mean, do we give anything up if we go towards a technical education? Well, I'm not so sure we need to frame it that way. So that's the discussion I think we need to have. Do we need to have stark differences between a technical education and a liberal arts education? I would say we probably don't.
Yeah, I wasn't saying, I think somewhere in the middle is fine. I wasn't saying it should be a completely technical education. I just think that, going back to my example of taking chemistry, if you're studying computer science, I mean, that's an example. That's not, I mean, I guess they're both technical, but there are courses that at the moment we require in our curriculum that I think may need a second visit.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And then since I have the microphone, I'm going to say my wife's a teacher in middle schools, and another one of my concerns is that we need to impress upon kids really early on what the importance is of math and STEM in general. Because I'm passionate about judging at high school science fairs, and I've judged at the International Science Fair. And when you see the level of what some of these kids are doing, it makes you think, wow, I can't suddenly turn on the switch in 12th grade and expect these kids to be designing rocket engines. It needs to start when they're in 4th grade, or, really, really early. And so that math doesn't fall behind. So when they get to 12th grade, they have these opportunities to take whatever direction they want to take.
Agreed. Agreed. This is a sideways comment that comes up in a lot of conversations for me, just in terms of either antiquated expectations of what a role requires, the proxy that often a bachelor's degree serves as a, or just a certain skill level. One of the things we hear from companies pretty categorically is that many of their job descriptions are woefully out of date. And again, companies are busy, they've got open job recs to fill, they're posting jobs, and a new hiring manager comes in and says, I don't really need that. But the practices within the companies don't change quickly enough to recognize, I think, some appetite for relaxing degree requirements. And so it might seem like an oversimplification. Sometimes I wish we could have the annual job description change day or something, just because I hear it so often and it seems to be an impediment or, a barrier to some roles that truly, depending on the role, don't really require that degree but for they had the skill set. And so it's something that comes up a lot. And on the middle school side, there's evidence to bear that out. We have quite a robust set of resources within the regional ecosystem in the high school space. We're not penetrating the high schools nearly enough and having as many kids be able to take advantage of the programming that exists. But the middle school space is definitely void of a lot of these rich STEM experiences, depending on particularly the school districts and the communities in which you find the students. So we're slowly but surely trying to address that, and there are more and more resources that are turnkey that we're trying to bring to bear on some schools. And again, it comes back to employers helping us invest in those kinds of initiatives and being there to help bring STEM or engineering or IT to life. So I think that your point's very well taken. And as someone who just graduated out of middle school, has a daughter who graduated out of middle school, and she's now a sophomore, and she's pursuing a health sciences pathway at her high school, and delighted. But then you talk to her, what do you want to do? I don't know, I have no idea. So, you think they're on the right track, and they're not sure, so let's just make sure they have as much available to them so they can make good quality informed choices as best they can. But I think the math issue is really key.
Yeah, one of my colleagues brought up about, reach to parents. Last weekend I went to the Cleveland Science Museum, and I just observed. And what I observed were parents showing the kids, making them read what's going on, walking them through it. Yeah. I mean, that's a big difference. It starts in the home. Yeah. But how do we reach the parents to open their kids' eyes? Mm-hmm. That's one of the biggest problems.
There was another question.
Well, my question kind of sort of changed because of the comments that were just made about job descriptions. How can either higher ed or employers reach out to employees who have or could have transferable skills? There are people, like I know people personally who have been like biologists or science people, but they ended up doing data analytics jobs. Mm-hmm. So they ended up changing career paths. How can you reach out to, I don't know if it's higher ed's thing or a trailblazing employers thing, but how can we reach out to those people?
I think it's both. And I know that, in fact, we're working on a pilot project to try to reach folks that have certain credentials or could be career changers, maybe coming out of finance or accounting that might be interested in IT, and if they were to be able to get certain credential, they would be qualified for that. So we're actually just starting to talk about that, and we're trying to bring employers together to collaborate on marketing to those folks, because we think first and foremost people like that want to know that there are opportunities and there are pathways for them, and so we're trying to figure out how to actually launch that in 2020. So.
Social media. Are you using social media? Or
not enough.
We use social media. That's one of the big. Everybody has a phone in their hands.
Yeah,
somehow we have to contact these folks through social media. Mm-hmm. Awareness.
I learned a lot about the sources through the social media.
Yeah.
Another question?
Yes, so my name is Ken Brickman. I work for the Center for Employment Opportunities. I did 4 years in prison, and in prison there are 45,000 people, 50,000 people currently incarcerated in state prisons. Having gone through the experience and been a tutor for Ashland University students, I recognize that there's a thirst for knowledge, achievement, and opportunity within those walls. What are the challenges or opportunities that you've seen that you can develop within that career pipeline?
So that was another policy piece that was on my list in terms of funding for the ability to take coursework, to take programs within prisons to help with retraining opportunities. That is something that we've done on a pilot basis with local partners, but certainly we could do more of that. So that would be a wonderful policy opportunity. We currently cannot collect any type of state share of instruction for any coursework that's delivered within any of our correctional facilities.
Another question?
Hi, my name is Marcus Clanton. I'm with Growth Opportunity Partners, and I'm neighbors with John in Midtown, so I'm happy to see him here on the policy. My question is going back to with development of a pipeline and students around the internship. So it's great to hear what some of your organizations are doing with internships in high school. So the students are one side of the equation. Can anyone talk to me more about what the corporations are doing and the interest that they have in actually developing programs like what you have at your companies to bring more high school students into the workforce, professional environments, and to give them exposure to the different career opportunities?
I'm going to talk about one other pilot that actually was partially funded by the Cleveland Foundation, and we're working on it right now. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of great IT awareness, exploration, and immersion programs that are being offered by Wright, BioEnterprise, Health IT, and the CLE, a lot of different organizations. And what we have found, we've all been running these programs for several years, in some cases 8 or 9 years, and we're realizing we need that next ladder for kind of the burgeoning student who has aptitude in software development or programming. And so we're in the process of building out we're calling it a pre-internship, project-based learning experience. We're recruiting companies to help us design projects that will deliver value within their companies, create a learning experience for students, but also become that next step so in our case, we have Cool Tech Challenge, and Baldwin Wallace has a programming competition. So we're gonna actually recruit kids from these programs as feeders, utilize a local boot camp's assessment that is being customized for our audience to make sure that we can deliver kind of a threshold skill set to the companies so they know what kind of project they could build for the students so that we can create an opportunity for these companies to have visibility into what high school kids can do. We know through our programs, through tech course programs, that companies are routinely wowed by what high school students can do. But when it comes to the point where we actually say, well, why don't you take them on as an intern, it becomes a whole different proposition. And so whether it's we can't hire people who are under 18 or we're in Cleveland Clinic or a bank and there are security issues, or certainly John MCPC in terms of risk, those kinds of things. So we're learning from others. In fact, we've done our due diligence with Autumn and Magnet with their program to see what works. So we can actually start to build that pipeline of kids from across the region who have this aptitude that we want to keep in the region. Whether they matriculate outside to a college or university of the region or stay here, we would prefer them to stay here. We want to get these kids connected to the companies between their junior and senior year. So that's something we're trying on a very small scale in the milieu of, I guess, the jobs in demand, and the most significant one that has the biggest gap, which is software development. So that's something in the IT space too.
Okay, thank you. And maybe one last question. I think there's another hand back there.
Good evening. My name is Mitty Davis-Jones, and I am the interim director of the Diversity Institute here at Cleveland State. So my question is about another population where we see disparate outcomes as adults, and this is adults with disabilities, particularly cognitive disabilities. And I'm wondering if any of you have any programs geared toward that population, which tends to be pretty much overlooked once they get out of high school, even if they get college degrees, in terms of being able to get integrated into the workforce.
It is a good question.
I will tell you that that's a population that we've looked into. We've run a couple of projects and pilots where we've worked with adults with disabilities and potentially cognitive disabilities, where we've had roles that they want to come in and be productive. That's what we found. They're looking for an opportunity to be productive, and they feel a tremendous sense of accomplishment when they can be, and we can utilize them. We've worked with some public organizations to bring in groups and as project type workers, where we can structure and have an ability for them to be productive and sharing that. We found it to be rewarding for both parties, and we were able to provide pay and earnings. We haven't found the ability to be consistent with that yet, but we have seen it as valuable, and we continue to look for opportunities to engage that community.
We have small projects on our campus. We partner with Echoing Hills, where we actually run a program with them on campus of about 20 students that are just getting integrated into what college experience is like. There's no coursework or classroom learning at the beginning. It's mostly social integration. But then we actually hire them for roles on our campus as well, and then slowly build that pipeline. We also work with a handful of employers to extend that to external employment. So we work with Echoing Hills, Project Search, and then our local disabilities division within our community.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for the excellent questions. We have one last question for our panelists, and that's, we've talked about a lot of different talent issues today. In some hypothetical world where you each had a magic wand and you could change one thing about the talent ecosystem from your own perspectives, what would that be that you would leave this room with? That is that single most important thing. We already talked, there's no silver bullets, but what's the one thing you would focus on? Dean Englund, maybe we can start with you.
I would focus on primary and secondary school students and avail them of all the knowledge about the new world of work, and bring in the parents to help those kids know that they need to prepare themselves in ways that I didn't need to prepare myself when I was in primary and secondary school.
I think mine would be more resources toward awareness for the high school counselors specifically, because so that they are more informed about different career opportunities that these students could help better prepare the students for these career opportunities.
I think if I had that magic wand, if I could touch this region, touch the individual talent from what I've seen, it would be to change the perception in people's minds, whether that be that you are in a disadvantaged situation and your perception is you always will be, and we see youth that say, why bother? I don't know where to go, so why bother? If I could change the perception of folks in this region, whether it's the youth or whether it's the parents that grew up with a Rust Belt attitude, it would be, I think, monumental if I could just get access to people's perceptions about their opportunity in this region.
So I'll focus on the ecosystem itself. I would say if I had a magic wand, I would take away maybe some of our own perceptions of what we can't change just because they've always existed, and try to erase those so that we could reinvent and rebuild for what we need to do today versus based on how it was built in the past.
That's a good question. Just to add, I love all the comments. I guess for someone who's been at this, and I certainly, in terms of the wealth of experience on this panel, others have been at this for a while, and many of you, based on your questions, have your own points of view and perspectives through your own practice in this complex field, is just, if I could, I guess, use a magic wand to have us all come up to a truly shared understanding of all of these issues and a clear sense of the assets we have so that we can truly optimize and propel what many of us know, or many of us intuit naturally or come to learn. I think sometimes I just struggle with just being impatient and wanting to get to that next frontier. And so I think we're close, in some ways. We're really far in others, and I just would love to see us take a big leap. And I think sometimes it's just that some of us have been in the trenches, some come to the conversation, think it's a brand new topic, and I just want to kind of get through that and onto the next frontier.
I'm Magic Wand. What I would change is more hands-on experience for skilled trade, because it seems like we have gotten away from that. I mean, we don't see it much in the high schools. Even after high school, people are getting away from the skilled trades that we really, really need: electricians, instrument techs, machinists. So my magic wand is to get back to that, get more back to skilled trades.
Thank you. On behalf of our panelists, join me in giving them a round of applause. I think this conversation has been extremely enlightening. Thanks so much, Gina Englund and Aaron, for all of your help in putting this on. I mentioned at the beginning, but as a graduate of this program, this is particularly rewarding for me to be able to sit up here and talk to you about what, quite frankly, for us, I think, will be the competitive differentiator for Northeast Ohio moving forward. You need lots of things to move the dial, none more so than talent now and talent in 5, 7, 10 years to stay competitive. So I think this is the beginning of a conversation. We've made great progress in some ways, and we have a lot of work to do still.
What's your magic wand?
Yeah, good question, Shilpa. Yeah.
Everyone just accepts aligning opportunities as the truth. Some people will get that more than others. Thanks for the question, though, Shilpa. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Drive safe. Enjoy the snow.